Have you ever looked at the world, at the politics, the culture, all the anxiety, and felt like you're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube that's just impossible?
Oh, absolutely. It's that feeling of total paralysis.
Right, you think, okay, let's fix crime. But to do that, you have to fix the family.
And to fix the family, you need to fix welfare, which means fixing the budget, and suddenly you're right back where you started.
You're stuck. There's no lever to pull that actually moves anything. It just feels like chaos.
It does. But what if it's not chaos at all?
That is the core question for today's deep dive. We're looking at excerpts from The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe, and they argue that these problems aren't random at all.
They say it's all part of a powerful, predictable, cyclical rhythm that has shaped Anglo-American history for centuries.
And this rhythm has a name, doesn't it?
It does. It's called the saeculum. It's an old idea, really, for a long human life cycle. Think about 80 to 105 years.
So basically, the maximum amount of time from when someone is born to when society has completely reset itself.
Exactly. It's like the seasons of nature, but for civilization. It constantly renews itself through 4 distinct phases or turnings.
And that's our mission today. We're going to unpack those 4 turnings and the generational archetypes that drive them to see if we can find a pattern in all the noise. Okay, so before we dive into the turnings themselves, the seasons, we should probably look at the underlying mechanics. The authors start with the idea of time itself.
Right, which is fascinating because our modern world is, it's pretty much obsessed with one kind of time.
Linear time.
Linear time. This idea of constant progress, that we're always improving, always moving forward on a journey that never repeats.
And if things go wrong, we just chalk it up to, bad luck.
That's what they call chaotic time. Just random events, history with no direction.
But the central argument here is that we're still governed by something much older.
We are. Cyclical time. The rhythm of repetition, of renewal. The seasons. And they argue the societies that try the hardest to suppress it are the ones most in its grip.
So what are the 2 major cycles at play here?
Well, you have the big one, the saeculum, that long cycle of 80 to 100 years. This is what the historian Arnold Toynbee called the cycle of war and peace.
Because major wars in Europe tended to happen at about 1-century intervals.
Precisely. But the engine driving that long cycle is the short cycle.
The generation?
The generation. And they define it as a group of people born over about 20 years who share a location in history, and because of that, a collective personality.
And this is the core mechanism, right? How the past gets translated into the future. As generations age, they move through different social roles.
Exactly. 4 phases of life, each about 20 years long. It starts with childhood, from birth to around 20. Your social role is just growth.
You're absorbing everything, taking in values.
Then comes young adulthood, say 21 to 41. Your role is vitality. You're out there serving institutions, testing the values you just learned.
Building a career, starting a family.
Right. Then comes midlife, 42 to 62, the age of power. Now you're managing the institutions. You're running the show.
And finally, elderhood, 63 and up. Your role shifts to leadership.
You're guiding the institutions, passing on the values, and as each generation moves into the next phase, the whole mood and behavior of society shifts with it. That's what pushes the saeculum forward.
Okay, so that brings us to the 4 seasons of the saeculum, the turnings. Each one, about 20, 25 years long?
That's right, and each with a totally distinct mood that always seems to catch people by surprise.
Let's start with the first one, spring.
The first turning, which they call a high, society's just come through a massive crisis, so the mood is very upbeat.
Institutions are strong.
Very strong, and individualism is seen as dangerous. The new civic order is being built, and conformity is key.
And the social motivator, they say, is shame. Why shame?
Because the memory of the crisis is still fresh. Everyone remembers that excessive individualism almost destroyed everything. So the priority is community. And you conform because you're afraid of letting the group down.
The prime example being the American high, right? From 1946 to about 1964.
Exactly. Post-World War II, suburbs, the organization man, incredible institutional trust, but also a lot of suppressed problems and injustices simmering just under the surface.
And all that suppressed energy has to go somewhere.
It does. It explodes in the second turning. An awakening. This is the summer. It's a passionate spiritual upheaval.
And the civic order built during the high comes under attack.
A full-blown attack. The motivator shifts from avoiding shame to following your own individual conscience.
So individualism comes roaring back.
It does. The focus turns completely inward. People don't want to fix the outer world of institutions anymore. They want to fix their inner world.
This is the consciousness revolution, 1964 to 1984, campus revolts, personal liberation movements.
A huge cultural divide, all focused on spiritual rebirth. It's a complete rejection of the conformist 50s.
So after that passionate summer, after the awakening, what happens when the energy starts to fade?
Well, you get the third turning and unraveling. This is autumn. The mood becomes downcast, cynical.
And individualism is now at its peak, but the institutions are falling apart.
They're decaying. The old civic order is rotting from the inside. The vision for the future turns pretty dark, and the social motivator becomes
Guilt.
guilt.
Why guilt?
Because society is so fragmented, the problems feel so huge and unsolvable that people just feel this free-floating personal responsibility for a collective mess they can't fix.
The book points out that periods just like this have always come before America's biggest crises.
Always. The 1760s before the Revolution, the 1850s before the Civil War, the 1920s before the Great Depression. It's always the same vibe.
Wild individualism, a sense of cultural decay, and a feeling that things are drifting towards a cliff.
And that's exactly what happens. That complexity and decay eventually trigger the fourth turning, a crisis, winter.
This is the decisive era.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's an era of massive secular upheaval. All the complexity of the unraveling just gets boiled away by some great peril of war and economic collapse, or both.
There's only one goal left.
Prevail. Just survive. The culture becomes purely practical, and the motivator flips again, this time to stigma.
So severe social punishment for anyone who doesn't conform to the group effort.
Exactly. This is the era of total wars, of forced societal reorganization. The Great Depression and World War II, from 1929 to 1946, is the last one.
And these events are so monumental, they end up completely resetting the system for either ruin or
for glory, creating the foundation for the next high.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating for me. The human characters in this drama, the generational archetypes that drive the cycle.
And the key thing to remember, something the authors stress, is that a generation is never like its parents' generation was at the same age. It's always a corrective.
Right. So let's look at the modern cycle, the one we're in now. Let's start with the prophet archetype.
That would be the boom generation, born roughly 1943 to 1960. They were children during that post-war high.
So they grew up in a world of strong institutions, conformity, a lot of confidence.
And they found it spiritually sterile. So as young adults, they are the ones who launched the awakening. They're the moral magistrates, the ones who have been waging the culture wars ever since.
And in old age, during a crisis.
They become the gray champion, the elder moral leaders who demand sacrifice for the greater good.
Okay, next up, the nomad. Generation X, born 61 to 81.
They were born right into the awakening. So their prophet parents were focused on, self-discovery and spiritual journeys.
Which means the kids were often left to fend for themselves.
They were the original latchkey kids. They grew up feeling neglected by society. So they became pragmatic, independent survivors.
This just do it generation.
That's a perfect way to put it. And in a crisis, when they're in midlife, they're the action-oriented managers who are less interested in debate and more focused on just getting the job done.
Then comes the hero archetype, the millennials, born 1982 and onward.
Yes, they were born into the cynical unraveling, but older generations reacted by becoming incredibly protective of them.
Baby on board signs, the decade of the child.
Exactly. So they were raised to be optimistic, team-oriented, and civic-minded. They're the ones who are expected to come of age during the crisis and provide the manpower, the collective strength to win the fight.
And finally, we have the artist archetype, the silent generation, born between 1925 and 1942.
They grew up suffocated, as the book says, during the last crisis, World War II, and the very conformist high that followed.
So they became risk-averse, the gray flannel suit generation.
Right. They were seen as cautious technicians. In their elderhood, during our current unraveling, they've been the arbitrators, the ones who believe in process, negotiation, and diversity.
The contrast is incredible. The GI generation, the last heroes, were praised for their can-do swagger. The silent generation that followed them were criticized for being too timid.
It's a total reversal. It shows how history is always course-correcting through its generations.
So let's focus on where the source material says we are now, or were when it was written, deep in a third turning, an unraveling.
And they lay out the symptoms very clearly. First, institutional decay. You have leaders of public agencies openly admitting their own organizations are just bureaucratic nightmares.
You definitely hear that a lot. And then there's social fragmentation.
It's at its peak. The culture wars get more intense, Everybody retreats into their own niche group, their own online tribe. Old alliances just crumble because identity becomes more important than the common good.
And the economy.
It's unbalanced. You get a boon, but it's fitful. High corporate debt, layoffs, and that huge gap between CEO pay and what a young person can make starting out.
And all this complexity, this individualism, can't go on forever. It makes basic governance feel impossible. Society is primed for a shock.
That shock is what they call the catalyst. It's the event that kicks off the fourth turning. It could be a single event like Black Tuesday or a series of them.
And the authors say the real danger isn't the catalyst itself, but how a society deep in an unraveling mood reacts to it.
Yes. They predict the most likely reaction is an implosion of societal trust, probably starting in the financial markets.
Because everything has become so abstract.
It's all become so dependent on anonymous transactions. People will suddenly realize they don't know who holds their mortgage or if their savings are actually safe. That spark of distrust could cascade into a full-blown panic.
That crisis, that winter, will be a time of maximum danger. It forces fundamental change.
And we can't stop the seasons from turning. But the authors are clear, this isn't about fatalism. We can prepare. The whole point is that history shapes generations, and generations shape history.
So for you, the listener, living through an unraveling, the challenge is probably to accept that those grand, sweeping civic projects, they might just be doomed to fail right now.
The focus should be smaller, more local. But when that catalyst hits, the rulebook gets thrown out completely. The shift from me to we will be sudden and total.
And that great shift, according to the book, will rest heavily on the shoulders of the hero generation, the millennials. They're the ones expected to provide that next wave of civic strength.
But for them to succeed, the older generations have to complete their own scripts. They have to play their part.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to ponder. The silent generation was often seen as cautious, while the GI hero generation before them won the last crisis through boldness and sacrifice.
So the question is this. If the millennials are destined to be the heroes of the next crisis, what unneeded reward or comfort is the current elder generation failing to relinquish? What necessary risk must they take, or what resource must they give up to ensure the millennials have the civic health and the clean slate they need to become the victors of the next fourth turning?